All right, welcome back. We do want to turn now to the Doomsday prophet murder trial in Idaho. Chad Daybell has now been transferred from jail to the custody of the Idaho Department of Corrections. Now, he reportedly entered a maximum security prison yesterday morning, and this is a look at the execution chambers. The jury found Chad Daybell guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder in the deaths of his first wife, Tammy, and also the deaths of J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan. Now, there are two children. They were the two children of his current wife, Lori Vallow Daybell. Lori is already serving a life sentence after being convicted in her murder trial. Of course, she faces another one coming up in Arizona. And after Chad's conviction, the jury had to deliberate whether he should get the death penalty. Now, last Saturday, after a little more than 7 hours of deliberations, they returned with a recommendation of death. And the judge followed that recommendation.
The court then orders as follows, and this will be contained in the court's judgment. At the conclusion of the case, as to count one, the conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception for the murder of Tylee Ryan, upon the jury's finding of guilty and return of the special verdict form, the jury finding beyond a reasonable doubt and having returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances when weighed against the mitigating circumstances do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust. The court, therefore, on count one, the defendant is sentenced to death. On count two, the first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan, the jury finding beyond a reasonable doubt and having returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances when weighed against the mitigating circumstances do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust. The court, therefore, on count two, sentences the defendant to death. On count three, the conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception for the murder of J.J. Vallow, the jury finding beyond a reasonable doubt and having returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances when weighed against the mitigating circumstances do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust. The court, therefore, on count three, sentences the defendant to death. On count four, first-degree murder of J.J. Vallow, the jury finding beyond a reasonable doubt and having returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances when weighed against the mitigating circumstances do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust. The court, therefore, on count four, sentences the defendant to death. On count five, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tammy Daybell, the jury, having found beyond a reasonable doubt and having returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances when weighed against the mitigating circumstances do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust, the court, therefore, on count five, sentences the defendant to death. On count six, the first-degree murder charge, the murder of Tammy Daybell, the jury, having found beyond a reasonable doubt and returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances when weighed against the mitigating circumstances do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust, the court, therefore, on count six, sentences the defendant to death.
All right, joining me now to discuss the trial and the death penalty verdict is one of the jurors. We are only referring to her as Tracy. Tracy, thank you so much for being with us, and also thank you for doing your public duty. I know that couldn't have been easy. I'm going to break this interview into two parts. We'll talk initially about the guilt phase, then we'll talk a little bit about the penalty phase. So initially, you've had a couple of days now to sort of think about what's gone on or during all that time of the trial. What are your impressions now, a couple of days removed from the guilt phase of the trial?
The guilt phase, actually, once we heard all of that evidence that the prosecution did a really good job of laying out the weeks and weeks we were there, and we followed the rules that the judge gave us, that if these certain things, as we went down each list for each charge, were true and the evidence supported that, we really had no other choice than to come up with the guilty verdict. All of the evidence that we had supported all of those questions that we answered. And as a jury, we went through it together and felt actually more comfortable even after we made our decision of guilty in all counts.
Tracy, going into the trial, this was a highly publicized trial. How much did you know about this case going in when you began your service?
Well, I knew the names because it's in Idaho, and Lori's case or trial was here last year in Boise. It had been moved from eastern Idaho, and I knew she had been found guilty. In addition to that, I remember when the children went missing, it was a big deal in Idaho to have the children missing for as long as they were. And then, of course, when they found their bodies on Chad's property, that was big news. But as far as listening to podcasts or researching information, I hadn't done any of that. So it was more the headlines. That's what I knew going into it.
Now, Tracy, one of the big questions that we had throughout this trial was, would it matter who came or who seemed to be the mastermind behind this whole thing? Was that ever a question, or was that ever addressed in deliberations? Did you come to a conclusion as to who was sort of masterminding this thing, or did you see it as something that they just came to together?
Well, going into it, I didn't know, because to me, Alex, I believe, was the one who actually did the killings. We know that Lori was convicted, so she was part of that. But after reading the texts, reading the emails, the fact that everybody went to Chad to find out who's dark, who's being possessed, who's a zombie, and he was the one who had a master plan, is what he called it. He wanted to alleviate all of the celestial earthly obstacles that would stop he and Lori fulfilling their want of getting married and living in Hawaii. And eventually, he said that he had visions. He was going to lead the second coming, 144,000, and Lori was going to do that with him because they'd been married before. So after seeing the texts and the emails, actually Chad was the mastermind of it all. He orchestrated it, had the plan, and instructed Lori and Alex what to do.
All right, fair enough. Let's move now to the penalty phase. How difficult of a decision was it to decide on the death penalty in this case?
The penalty phase was actually more difficult. I think all of us went in knowing how large of a responsibility it was. It weighed heavily on our heart and our mind that we were choosing or deciding if a man is going to go to death or not. But as in the penalty phase, or the decision phase, we followed the instructions that there were these aggravated circumstances. He did kill for money as one part of the motive. They were also heinous acts. Chad has no regard for human life, and he's apt to do it again. Those were our set circumstances. We had to make sure that he had met those aggravating choices. Then from there, it was all the death penalty unless we could come up with mitigating circumstances, something about Chad that would allow us to say, nope, these good things about Chad, we can't give him the death penalty. The defense tried to say he was a good man as far as raising his children, as far as going to church, and never had a speeding ticket. But to us, that wasn't enough mitigating circumstances not to justify the death penalty.
Did you know that he had instructed his defense attorney not to put on a case of mitigation? And did that at all play into your decision?
I didn't know he had instructed them, but we were hoping that that Chad would actually speak, that he would give us a reason, say something, defend himself, give us something to talk about, to actually have to decide, was this not his idea? What did he think? Why did he do it? What did he justify? And the fact that he didn't say anything, and the defense really didn't give us anything besides his closing argument that Chad had been a good dad and a good member of the church. So we really had no other choice.
All right, I'm going to let you go after this, Tracy. Again, thank you for joining us. Any final thoughts about this entire experience? I mean, as you mentioned, it was weeks and weeks and weeks. This was it was a spectacle. It was a tragedy. I mean, there were so many different aspects to this case. Any final thoughts?
I just hope that after all of this time, the detectives, the families, the judge, the prosecutors, they have lived this for 4+ years, and they had to go through it, witness it, undig the bodies, and all I can hope is this in some way puts a little bit of a bow tie in the end of it, and they can hope that they can go on a little bit better with their life after all they've been through.
Yeah, I think we all second that emotion as well. Tracy, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Truly appreciate you taking out the time. And again, thank you so much for your service and doing your public duty. We'll see you again real soon. All right, folks, coming up next, we're going to continue our in-depth look into the Doomsday Prophet murder trial. We're going to hear from a prosecutor in the case. Keep it here on Court TV, the front row seat to justice.
Credit.
The jury has returned its special verdict. On count one, the defendant is sentenced to death.
To all those who held Tylee, JJ, and Tammy in their hearts, we hope these verdicts bring a measure of healing and closure.
You never wish harm on anybody. It's good that he can't hurt anybody else.
Trial. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala. We are continuing our coverage of the Doomsday Prophet murder trial. Defendant Chad Daybell is now on death row after being convicted in the first-degree murders of Tammy Daybell, JJ Vallow, and Tylee Ryan. Well, last Saturday, the jury deliberated for just over 7 hours before reaching a decision to recommend the death penalty. Well, Daybell is now in custody of the Idaho Department of Corrections, where he has been transferred to a maximum security prison, where he will spend the rest of his life for as long as that is. Joining us to discuss is former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani and national parenting and family relationship expert Dr. Sue Kornbluth. All right, doctor, I want to start with you. I want to refer to that interview with Tracy, and she talked about they figured out that he was the ringleader, and it's an interesting question we had throughout both trials. Who was the real ringleader? You heard his attorney say that he was a target of Lori, but yet she said, based on his own words and text messages, she thought he was the puppet master. I want to get your general ideas and thoughts about that aspect of the case.
I think they were both involved in it, but I do think that he was more of the ringleader, and she was obsessed with him. And so when you're obsessed with somebody, you do whatever they say. And I think he had power over her. And that power can also sometimes lead to brainwashing of someone. And he took over, and he told her what to do. She believed in it. I don't think she's mentally stable as well. But I think really? Michael?
Really? Yeah, I think we figured that out.
Exactly. But what I think that juror said that really made an impact on me was that he did not say a word to even save his life from not being killed. And in a lot of cases, I don't agree with the defendants testifying, but in this one, I think he should have, because maybe there could have been a little bit of sympathy for him to not spare his life. But I don't know, because he murdered 2 kids.
Yeah. It was a heinous crime. You cannot run away from it. But Nima, the point is well taken, because the juror, Tracy, as she was talking about it, it sounded like they wanted, she said, I think those were her exact words, they wanted to hear from him. They, juries generally, they don't want to give the death penalty. I think that's fair to say. It's difficult to get a jury to give the death penalty in this country. And her words made me think that it might have made a difference.
It might have, Michael, and the former prosecutor in me cringes every time a juror talks after a verdict, because they may say something that may cause a mistrial. I don't think Tracy said enough, but we all know the defendant has a constitutional right not to testify. It cannot be used against him. So those types of statements, when jurors say, hey, we wanted the defendant to talk, and the fact that he didn't talk was something that we considered, that's a no-no. So hopefully that juror didn't give the defense something to use on appeal, because we know that even though we all love jurors to testify here on Court TV, the Constitution is absolute, and it's very clear that that cannot be used against them.
All right, fair comment there, no doubt about it. Doctor, I want to ask you about sort of, it's, again, a question we've had throughout the trials of this couple, I'll call them. This idea that I feel like, and I want to get your thoughts, that they truly bought into, and what went on in the penalty phase, they really bought into this whole idea of this offshoot, this bizarre religious belief. Even though Doomsday never came, this whole dark and light and all this, and they had these exalted positions in whatever this little bizarre belief was. I mean, how does that happen to people? This is a guy who raised, kids with married for many years. He meets this woman. Is this not just a sort of sexual power thing as possible? Is there more happening here?
It could be the sexual power thing, but actually, it's a lot more than this. You know, you cannot imagine, I can't imagine, but people have delusions. They also have something known as delusions of grandeur, where they believe that they are more than they are, like a prophet, like God. It goes along oftentimes with schizophrenia. So I think that is part of what happened here. And it's...
So quickly, let me just jump in.
Sure.
So does that come from, was it that, I think prosecutor had a narrative that he was bored with his life. He was just this normal guy and he wanted something more. Can it come from that?
It can also come from that. It can be biological cause, or it can be an environmental cause. It could also be that he had the lowest of self-esteem, like a narcissist, and he needed to be in power and control of everyone else because he didn't feel he was in power of anything in his life. So he could take a woman and control her. He could take, the people at his church and have that power over them to feel like he was God or more than life. So, Michael, it could be a lot of things that we just discussed. The bottom line is he's a murderer.
Yeah, and what you just said there really sounds about right to me. Really seems to fit the bill.